Welcome to the Sonical.ly podcast, where music creators educate music creators. I'm Gina.
And I'm Elmo.
In today's episode, we have the immense pleasure of hosting the incredibly talented Lindsey Stirling, a violinist, songwriter, and performer whose electrifying blend of classical music with pop, rock, and electronic dance music has captivated audiences around the world. Lindsey burst onto the scene with her appearance on America's Got Talent, and since then, she has continued to dazzle us with her dynamic performances and innovative music videos, which often go viral. Her new album, Duality, out on June 14th, is a visionary meditation on inner wisdom, personal strength, and the ever-shifting nature of identity.
In our conversation today, we'll dive into Lindsey's process for composing and learn more about how she merges her classical training with modern music genres to create a sound that's entirely her own. We'll also talk about her inspirations, her experiences in the music industry, and what she envisions for the future of her astonishing career.
So, without further ado, let's welcome the phenomenal Lindsey Stirling to our show. Woohoo!
Hello, Lindsey.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for joining us. We've been so excited to have you on the show. We're huge fans of your story. We're huge fans of your music and everything that you do. You're such an inspiration to so many people. Our community will get so much out of you joining us today. I'm wondering, though, if we might be able to rewind back to the beginning. Did you grow up with music in your life?
I did, yeah. My parents loved music. Neither one of them were musicians, but they, really surrounded us with a lot of music, whether it was like playing classical music in our home or they would take us to like the community orchestra concerts. And, it was just something that they loved. And because I was surrounded by it, I started asking for violin lessons when I was 6 years old. And, they ended up getting me violin lessons and I've played ever since.
What were some of the sonic experiences going on throughout the household? Was it a lot of certain classical music periods like Bach and Mozart and that type of thing? Or was it like a diverse array of music happening in the house?
It was a pretty wide span, but they loved classical. And I can remember the albums that were our favorites were the Scheherazade Suite was my favorite one. I think I liked it because it was a story. Like my dad explained that this is about a princess and, she's falling in love and it's in, the other side of the world. And, would just kind of tell me the story about what the music was telling. And I think that really resonated with me. And it's, something that I now very much try to take into what I do. I try to make instrumental music tell stories, probably much to the fact that that's kind of how I was introduced to music as, like the instruments are narrators.
I've noticed that a lot about your music, and we find that a lot of inspiration that is drawn towards creation is as a result of a lot of sort of like things that were happening in childhood in terms of like the sonic experiences. What about the modern side of the music? These beats with your violin playing, was that sort of happening in your house too?
No, not at all. I will say in high school, I remember discovering like a techno station on the radio that was like, it didn't even come fully through. It was kind of like fuzzy. There's a lot of static in it because it wasn't like a pure signal from close by. But I remember finding it one day and being like, oh my gosh, I love this. And so like on my way to school, I would listen to this like fuzzy techno station. That was my introduction to electronic music. And then when I went to college, like that's when, Nero and I'm trying to think like Swedish House Mafia and all these like earlier DJs were getting big and I loved their stuff. And then Skrillex came on the scene and kind of changed the game for me.
As he often does for many people.
Yeah.
I'm wondering because you went through the classical music training path. I don't know if your I played cello growing up, and my teacher was nice sometimes, but then when I didn't play my pieces right, I'd get yelled at and I'd get hurt, and yeah, it was kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
But there is a kind of a linear sort of path to that playing because you're kind of playing other people's pieces to the way that your teacher wants you to. At what point along that line did you discover the process of creating music?
Yeah. I joined a rock band when I was in high school. And so even though I wasn't like writing the main melodies, like the guys would write the melodies, they kind of had me join the band as like a violinist, but I got to like interpret their music and write my own parts and like listen to the music and be like, what do I hear that like the violin could fit in? Like, oh, is there a new melody I could add? Or do I want to double the vocal? Like whatever. It just for the first time made me think of music in a new way rather than just trying to be a perfect, like basically in classical music, I felt like I was the instrument. You're playing an instrument, but you're playing it based on how someone else wants you to play. So you're just an extension of your instrument rather than the creator of what your instrument's going to play and express. And so it was really exciting to me for the first time to be like, oh my gosh, I get to be so much more creative. And then when I went to college, I started having a little bit more fun with it and being like, okay, well, I could write to their music. I bet I could write my own music and, figuring out, oh, what would I even want to write? Like I never even, as a classical musician, you never even get to choose your pieces. Like you're told exactly what to play and how to play it. And so it's like, what would I want to play? I guess I could play anything. I could play any style. Like, do I want to do rock? Do I want to do electronic? Like, And so it was quite exciting to like, for the first time, really open it up really wide and just be able to play whatever I wanted. And, of course, that meant finding the right, person to work with, like the right producer, which was quite a bit of a, I don't know, kind of a miracle how I happened to find somebody. I know nothing about music. I knew nothing about writing. And yet somebody introduced me to this guy that was an electronic producer in Provo, Utah, not really an electronic scene. And so I felt like I was like kind of led and guided through the way of like putting it out there, saying, this is what I want. And things come to you when you ask.
Do you remember the first song that you created, the process that you went through, and what the experience was like when you sort of got that initial dopamine hit of, wow, like that came from the core in the soul of me?
Yeah, it was when I was actually still in high school and I wrote a little rock violin piece. And it was the first time like the violin was the solo of a rock song. And, I didn't even know how it came to be because I didn't know how to write music. I don't play any other instruments, so I can't even like make the chords. But I like kind of came up with this little melody and I was like, that'd be cool. And if I had a friend come write guitar to it and record some drums in my basement. And, we just kind of put together this little song and it was so cool. It was just like, I remember being so excited about this. I called it violin rock. I didn't even know what to call it. But yeah, that was a pretty cool moment.
And from that moment of discovery, you've had so many experiences along the way up until the present time, so many achievements, so many accomplishments. You've, like I said before, impacted so many lives, 27 million followers on social media. What were some of the hardest moments in your journey to becoming a renowned creator, artist, performer? And how did you overcome those hardships?
Yeah, I think that, I think those moments when you get discouraged, when you feel like you're not enough, and it can come from outside sources telling you aren't enough, or sometimes it can come from yourself when you're just discouraged and you think like, what am I even doing? Like I'm such, why did I think this was even possible? Like it's one thing for the outside world to tell you things, but then when you turn it around and believe it yourself, and I'm really grateful that early on I had some pretty extreme, like embarrassing, disappointments where my little musical heart was broken. And I say I'm grateful for those because I've had to face them many times since. It's not like you get past those initial ones and then you get a fan base and then you never doubt yourself again. It's like over and over again, you're going to feel like you aren't enough. You're going to feel like you don't have what it takes, or maybe you're a has-been. All of a sudden you feel like no one cares anymore. Like, what am I doing? Like, I never even reached my peak, and and I'm already falling down. Like, so whatever these thoughts are, I'm really glad I had some pretty big moments in the beginning, because it just taught me that, like, unless you're willing to pick yourself up and choose to believe in yourself and choose to say, I'm going to get back up after I fall. And I know that voice inside my head is telling me that I shouldn't try again or that I'm not good enough, but I'm not going to listen to that voice. And I'm going to choose to listen to something else. And, the idea that we all just believe in ourselves, like the people that are up there doing the thing, it's just not true. It's just that we choose over and over again to say, I'm not going to believe that narrative. I'm going to write a new one today. I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to work a little harder. It's all about just like almost like training your mind.
Yeah, I mean, in a past interview, you had said that the first heartbreak was the America's Got Talent experience. I'm wondering which of the comments during that experience from the judges lived rent free in your head after the broadcast, and how were you able to drown out those voices to get up and try again?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Piers Morgan was pretty harsh. He was just kind of mean. He said things that didn't need to be said. It's one thing to say you're not a fan of something. And I think that looking back on it, they weren't necessarily wrong. Like I didn't do great that night, and that's fine. But they were not Piers Morgan was not the kindest. But I think one of the ones that really stuck with me for a minute was Sharon Osbourne. And again, it's not that she was mean, but she told me, like, I think you need to be in a group. I think you need to be like a backup for somebody, basically. You need a singer, you're back here. And, you know, in the moment looking at it, it's like that wasn't bad advice to give from her perspective. But at the same time, we all have intuition. We all have this voice inside of us. We all have our own instinct or our own knowledge of like, that's not what I want to do. I want to do something over here. And so even though, it was like, she's a professional. She does this for a living. She knows talent. Maybe I should listen to her. Maybe I should just be backup for somebody else. That's probably a smarter route, but then there was this inner voice that was like, no, 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 no. Keep writing music, keep doing your thing, keep pushing over here, because if you go, don't do it. Don't go over there. And it would have been an easier route for sure. But like, I think it's so important to not trust what everybody else says. Like the more opinions we get in life, the more confused I think sometimes we get, because we start to doubt what we actually feel and what our heart's actually telling us. And so I think all that advice that you get in life from other people, it just has to be taken with a grain of salt. And you have to really just trust, what do I feel?
There must have been a moment of tapping into your inner voice during that time. Like, do you remember that moment where you started to listen?
I think it was gradual, like I was pretty humiliated after that show. And I just remember being like, well, that's not going to happen again. I'm not going to get up on a stage again, ever. It was so embarrassing. But then as my little heart started to heal, I just think that I'm such a strong believer in the fact that our mind is very loud. It's very chattery, and it's always going to try to protect you. It's going to tell you like, that was embarrassing. We don't want that to happen again. So never do that again. It's going to try to tell you that this is a better, smarter route. It's safer. Don't take the big risky way. Your mind's going to try to protect you, but your heart and your inner gut, or your spirit, like whatever you want to call it, like that is a little bit quieter, but it's also more calm. It's not as chattery. So if you like get past the chatter and you kind of sink deep, and that's why I think meditation, or like, like going to church, or like these moments when everything goes a little bit still and you have a chance to actually listen to your spirit or your heart. It's a lot truer of a compass. And so like once my brain kind of settled down from the chatter, I was able to like sink a little deeper and just be like, actually, I don't want to give up. Actually, I think my gut is telling me like, don't you dare give up. There's more for you here. And so it was this gradual process of just like shutting down the mind a little bit and coming down here.
I mean, now that you have so many followers on social media, I can't imagine that all of the comments that you get are positive. And with the AGT moment, it was sort of like those few comments that like broke your heart, but now it could be on a daily basis where you get negative comments. Is there a numbness now to it, or is there way that you have trained yourself to kind of go back to manage the reaction?
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but it's always gonna hurt. It's never fun to hear people say like mean things about you, especially when people jump on the comments and like it and agree with it. And, it's always gonna hurt a little bit. And I think it's such an important thing to like take a step back from it and like be able to gauge where you're at. And sometimes it's like, you know what, I need to take a break from social media. I need to get off of it for a week. And I do that every once in a while. I'll take a social media fast and I won't go on it. And I'll do that until I feel like I'm safe to come back. Other times it's more like, oh, wow, that really hurt. If that really hurt, well, that means that I believe it. It means that, because if someone says something that I absolutely don't care about or don't agree with, it's like, that's silly. It really won't bother me. It's only when somebody says something that you're like, oh, actually, like, I'm kind of insecure about that. They got me in my weak spot. And so I feel like it's almost like a little bit of a self check-in when something really hurts, regardless of what it is in life, whether it's a hater comment or whether it's like a comment said by a family member that you're like, oh, I didn't like that. That made me feel really uncomfortable. It's important to like take that as a gauge and say like, okay, why did it hurt so much? What do I need to do to like work on myself a little bit so that, and I remember the most recent one that really got me was people started talking about how old I looked. And no woman ever wants to hear that she's like looking ancient. And it really hurt. Like I immediately went online and bought like a bunch of skincare products and like, got a facial. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, am I actually looking old? And then I stopped and I was like, wait. Yeah, I've been doing this for 12 years. Of course I look older than I did when I started. And like, of course I'm aging, and that shouldn't be the end of the world. And so it made me, rather than trying to like scramble and be youthful forever. Of course, I'm always going to want to take care of my face, but more importantly, it was like, this is a good moment for me to realize I want to be okay with aging. I want to be okay with that. Otherwise, I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life. And so I think that was actually a very important moment for me to have and take into perspective that like aging is a privilege. I am so much more than my body and my face. Okay, we're going to work on that. We're going to work on that. So anyways, I think sometimes these comments can be a great way to check yourself.
Absolutely. For the record, you look great. Gina?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, Gina looks great. You look great.
Honestly, I could definitely feel what you're saying right now. So I'm just thinking, I'm like, preach, lady, preach. You got this.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. A lot of my girlfriends, when I like shared this with them, they were all like, me too. Like, yes, it's such a epidemic in our world of women just being terrified of aging. And I think we need to rewrite the narrative. Like, it's such a way that our minds and, society controls us and makes us feel like that's our only value in a way. And, I was like, yeah, I want to be part of the process, a tiny piece of that process of rewriting that story, that we're so much more than that.
Yes.
100%. Your new album, Duality, explores themes of internal conflict and the human condition. Can you share what inspired you to delve into these themes?
Yeah, well, it started in like a bit of a music area because I was trying to like really hone in on the sound. What does this album sound like? And I just kept feeling like I was kind of like binding myself up every time I'd like really try to be like, it's a rock album, or no, it's a cinematic album, or like, no, I'm going to lean more pop. Like I just kept feeling like more and more trapped the more I tried to like find the sound. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write. I'm just going to write music that feels good. I'm just going to write music that feels exciting and true. And I ended up writing a lot of different sounds in this album. And I was just like, you know what? That's kind of like my spirit. Like I have so many different sides to me. Everybody does. And it's even interesting to think that like we are all so complicated and conflicted internally. Like we have parts of ourselves that need to connect with people so badly, but yet sometimes when we're struggling, we isolate and we have to be alone, even though we need connection. It's like there's parts of us that are so brave and like are ready to go get the world. And then the very next day you can feel so afraid. And so it's just really interesting. I just think we're all so conflicted. I think there's, these beautiful dualities, and life is about learning balance. It's about learning, okay, there's all these parts of myself. What part do I want to highlight and make stronger? What part do I keep just for myself? What part do I need to forgive? What part do I need to let go of? Like all these different pieces of us, and realizing that every single piece makes us who we are. They're all important. But we get to be the master of like what we want to shine from ourselves in this conflict that's constantly going on inside.
That's super fascinating because you had mentioned that you had gone into the studio and just started experimenting with sounds and sonics and different feelings of music. When did, within that process, the theme of the concept EP sort of click?
Yeah, I almost feel like these themes kind of pulled themselves out of the music. Like I wrote a lot about like the way I was feeling, and I wrote, I was always trying to really pull my emotions into each of the songs, and I was writing about some of the duality themes. Like I'd be like, I want this one to be about like like leaning inward and trusting yourself, even if the world is trying to make you believe something else, like I think that's a duality. Like, so I was writing about some of these themes, but it wasn't until the album was actually almost done that I started to realize like, oh, there's a lot of like songs about inner conflict in here. Oh, there's a lot of different sounds in this. Like, like, and then I realized that it kind of was about duality, and I loved the name. And so, yeah.
The songs Eye of the Untold Her and Inner Gold explore the contrast between intuition, faith, and knowledge. After you did the songs for the movie Chosen, I realized you were a person of faith. How did your faith make an impact in the creation of these songs?
I mean, I think my faith is kind of just ever present in my music because, I'm a spiritual person, and it's funny as I've grown as a person, faith has like slightly changed for me in a really beautiful way in terms of like I feel like I connect with God through like meditation and breath work. And I'm like, actually, that's very similar to prayer. It's just a different name. It's like realizing that all these different types of faith, they kind of rely on a lot of the same exact principles. And there's a huge overlap. And it's just made the idea of faith and, religion and all these things that seem so divisive just seem so connected, and I think it's really just, a beautiful thing that connects me more to other people, my belief in God and my belief in, in this connection that's so much bigger than ourselves. So I think that goes right into my music of like wanting this music to be connecting, wanting it to make people feel something and them to like look inward and, and feel something. Cause I think that's really what faith and God, really do for us. They help us to like feel that connection to something bigger.
Speaking of which, Evil Twin and Scarlet Queen, you explore the tension between feeling adequate and feelings of insufficiency. We touched on some of these moments before in your career, but when I see your presence and your essence on stage, or I see your content on social media, the word, quote unquote, insufficiency would be probably the last word that comes to my mind when describing you. But when do you feel these negative thoughts start to creep in, and how do you combat them? Like, is it when you don't get enough sleep the night before, or like, I don't know, when does it happen?
When does it happen? Honestly, it's when my mental health isn't in a good place, and it can show up in any state. It can show up, you know, um, I feel like I've gotten a lot better at feeling like not letting those feelings overcome me when I'm on tour. But there have been seasons of touring when I was so hard on myself and would go backstage and cry after the shows because I just was so sure that everybody was so disappointed that they bought a ticket that night, and I hadn't done enough and I hadn't been good enough. And it wasn't for lack of trying. It was just like, gosh, I wasn't perfect. And, but it's not like the show was probably any less, sufficient than the show that I've done when I felt great. It was that my mind wasn't in a good place. And so no matter what happened out on that stage, I was going to see the negative. I was going to see the mistakes rather than the feeling that was created or the joy that was felt, or, it's like, just where's your mind focusing? And I find that like if, when I'm home off tour, if I'm not doing all the things that I need to do that help me be in a good mental health place, then I start to it's very easy anywhere in any phase to start to be like, oh, I'm not enough. Like I'm not good enough. Like why, whether it's socially or professionally or, the things I've accomplished, like whatever it may be, like there's always room to, I guess there's always lack and there's always abundance. And that's a lot of what I was trying to like say in the songs is like choosing whether to live in a place of like lack and you're never enough, or whether to see the abundance in life that's constantly all around us.
Cool. On a Steve Harvey Instagram short that I frequently go back to, he talks about prayer being powerful, but prayer without action being meaningless.
Mm.
The theme of surrender and survive reminded me of this because it touches on control versus letting go. In your experience, when is it time to take the reins of life? And when is it time to let go and leave it to the heavens?
I've thought a lot about this idea of surrender um, over the last few years. Like it's been a word and a mantra I've been really working on. And I feel like I finally kind of gained an understanding that rung true for me. And it was actually in a therapy session. And my therapist was like telling me, you just need to learn to let that go. And I was like, how are you supposed to surrender something that you want so badly? How am I supposed to, quote unquote, not care anymore, about something that I care so much about? And she made this distinction. She was like, it's not that you no longer want it. It's not that you no longer care. It's not that you stop trying. She's like, you stop trying to control how it happens. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I can do that. Because this idea of like, oh, you stop caring, or when you stop wanting something, that's when it comes. Like, there are certain things I'm never going to stop wanting, but it's you let go of the worry, not the desire. And so it's like, yeah, I can still do my part, work towards it, but at the same time, accept that I don't know how this thing is going to come. I don't know if it will come. I know I will be okay without it, even if I do want it. You still put in your work, you put in your time, you do your thing, but you trust that there's a bigger picture at play, that God knows better than you. And it's kind of nice because when you do let go of the reins a little bit of like how it's going to happen, it gives room for the magic. It gets room for the fact that it could happen, these dreams or whatever it is, they could come in a way that's way beyond the resources that you could create. If you're just holding on to it and trying to make it happen your way. And that's been a big distinction for me.
Can you give us some examples of some things that you're wanting and hoping for in life, like some new dreams that you're kind of praying for?
You know, I mean I have so many little dreams and little things that I'm still excited about, but I think one of the ones I have to accept the most regularly is just that like I can't control my dating life in so many ways. Like, you can't control the decisions of others. You can't, um I've had some pretty rough experiences with love. Love hasn't been the most kind to me in my life, and getting up from that and like healing my heart time and time again, and just like accepting that like I couldn't control his decisions. I can't control the kind of person that he became, or I can't control who comes into my life all the time. Like I can say yes to opportunities and go out, but you can't force someone to come into your life. And so I think that's a big way that I've just had to learn that, you know, I can still want it, but I can't control it, and I'm going to let that go.
I'm wondering if we can move on to some technical questions. In the realm of music creation, how does making a top line with a violin differ from a top line using voice? Do you throw on beats and improvise a bunch of parts? Or do you do it the traditional way, writing out notes on a staff and then start recording?
Yeah. I write pretty improvisationally. Usually we'll have like a bit of a track, a little bit of a bed created, and then I'll write violin melodies over it until I'll try a bunch out until I find something that's like, oh, that's catchy. And I will say I think violin or instrumental melodies, they have to be very different than a vocal melody. Like every once in a while there'll be certain vocal songs, pop songs, whatever, that you're like, oh, this sounds great on an instrument. But a lot of times, things that sound great on a voice, the kind of melodies that sound great on a voice, they don't sound particularly great, at least on a violin. And so it's interesting. You have to write in a very different way than a traditional top liner would write a melody, because it's like, it's not going to be sung. It's got to be a little bit more, it's got to move a little bit more, in my opinion, usually. To be honest, a lot of what tells the emotion. It's of course the violin melodies. That's a huge part. Also, I have to give a huge shout out to like all the amazing producers I've worked with through the years, because a big part of it is what's happening in the tracks. That's what sometimes is what's making you like, oh wow, I feel so free, or like, oh, I feel so like gritty right now, like, oh, like, you know. So it's a big huge process working with these producers, like trying to pull out these themes and emotions as they're like creating the tracks and trying to guide them in that way. So that's a huge part of it.
We're now at our last question, and thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we thank you so much for your transparency. And as I had mentioned before, this interview is for the purpose of educating the next generation of music creators. What advice would you give to young artists who look up to you and aspire to make their mark as an accomplished artist, songwriter, performer like yourself?
My best advice would be, you know, I mean, I think that if from a like marketing standpoint, so much of making music these days is about learning to market it. And I think that that's such a heavy thing to unpack. And I think with that, it's hard to stay true to what you want to do. It's hard to stay true to yourself because your smarts brain and your marketing brain turn on sometimes, and it can sometimes override the passion or the music, when you're trying to do that. So I would say both are important, but make sure you're striking a balance between the marketing side of yourself, and the branding side of yourself, and then just the side of yourself that is passionate and has a voice and wants to share something special. So I'd say they're both important, and you have to constantly balance the two.
So much for that. I think that's going to go a long way. At this point, we are now going to bring Gina back, and we are going to do the Gina Bina rapid fire round. Gina?
All right, guys, now for Gina Vina's rapid fire round. All right, number 1. What DAW do you use and why?
I use Logic. I've always been a Logic girly.
Awesome. Okay, favorite plugins?
Reverb. I love the Valhalla reverb, my favorite, for sure.
And number 3, what is a sound that always brings you joy?
Honestly, like twinkles. Like, I don't even know what to call it, like fairy twinkles and chimes.
Beautiful. And number 4, how would you rank your music creator skill sets out of 10? Beat making?
Oh, like a 3.
Number 2 is lyric writing.
Like a 5.
Okay, sound design.
I think I'm good at directing it, but making it myself, it's probably a 5, and probably an 8 at directing it.
Okay, and mixing.
Mixing. I actually think I give really nice mixed notes. So if we're talking about mixing notes, I'm going to give myself like a 7.
Yay! And what about music theory? Oh, come on.
Oh man. Okay, if you're talking 10 years ago, it would have been like an 8. But nowadays, I feel like it's probably like a 6.
And what about arrangement?
I'm good at arrangements, so I'm gonna give myself an 8.
Okay. What is your reaction, your facial expression when you know you've made some heat?
Yeah. What's my expression? It's probably just like an elated smile.
Okay, so when do you feel 100% happy with the song you made?
Honestly, usually when I'm on stage.
Mm,
And it's
good
usually
answer.
not until I get on stage. And suddenly when we're planning the tour, it's all of a sudden like, this is magical.
Yes, you get the feels. All right.
You feel it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I know number 7 might be a little tricky, but would it be possible to show us how you would express duality in a dance move?
In my most recent music video, I feel like I expressed it pretty well through the kind of movements. They were like kind of flowy, but also jagged as I played. So that was kind of fun.
Is it kind of like that?
Yeah,
Like that?
kind of like
Okay,
woo,
similar?
woo,
Okay.
woo.
If AI technology was somehow able to take over our job as music creators, what new career path would you
Career
choose?
path? I really enjoy. I think I would really enjoy artist development. So if there was any artist to develop, I would love to be like, help somebody else find their vision.
Your last question is, what's next for Lindsey Stirling? Anything you want to promote to the Sonically community?
Yeah, we're gearing up. We're about ready to go on tour. So I'll be touring the rest of the year, which is really exciting. We'll be doing a US summer tour, a Europe fall tour, and then we'll probably be coming back for, you know, maybe some Christmas touring. We'll see.
Come to Canada.
Oh yes, I know. I haven't been to Canada in so
We love
long.
you here in Canada. Come to
Oh,
Canada.
thank you. I love Canada. It's beautiful up there.
Oh, you've been. Okay, well, we'll be waiting for you. So we love you.
Oh, love you too. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you so